Hey everybody, welcome back to the Son of the Morning Comics channel, and we're here to do another indie review. Today what we're going to be looking at is The Resistance, issue number 1 of 6 by J. Michael Straczynski, Mike Deodato Jr., and Frank Martin. It is an AWA Upshot release. I can honestly say I've never heard of this publisher, but when I stopped by my comic shop the other day when I was picking up my new stuff, they were sort of promoting it, saying that this is a really good book, they thought I would like it and to check it out. So I don't really know too much about AWA Upshot, but when I look inside here, I can see that the chief creative officer is Axel Alonso. So we know it's somebody who's got some experience behind him there. And it also says that it's printed in Canada, so I'm not sure, but it may in fact be a Canadian publication, which, if you're a Canadian like me, you kind of like to see stuff like that. Now, another thing that I thought was pretty cool before we actually get into the story is that it's got a really cool wraparound cover here. I think that that's always neat, always cool to look at. And another thing that I'll comment on before we start is that this is a very high quality comic. There's clearly a lot of TLC put into it, and I'm referring to the quality of the book itself, the pages, the cover, everything like that. Never mind the fact that I really enjoyed the writing and the art that's in this book. So before we actually start talking about the story, I will say that it's a very topical comic here. So we all know what's going on in the world right now, and it's no fun for everybody. And this story does deal with a pandemic. So if you're somebody that is gonna have anxiety induced by hearing about a story about a pandemic, then maybe don't watch this video, but excuse me. But if you're not, it's a really cool story so far, so let's get into it. So we have here on the first page, I'll just read it to you just because it's interesting. We got a cool picture of the globe. No one knew why it happened, but everyone had theories. The pandemic was a deliberate act of bioterror. Now, we don't know if that's actually the case. So basically, what's happening in this book here is it starts off with various leaders from different parts of the world giving their sort of ideas about what has gone on and what has caused this pandemic that is spreading like wildfire. It is overtaking the world. I believe at the time of this issue, they say that something like 400 million people had died from this disease worldwide. So, it's also a very deadly disease because out of the 100%, out of the only 95% of the people who actually contract, or I've got that wrong. Only 5% of the people who contract this virus actually survive, and they aren't sure what is going to happen to those people afterwards. They don't know what kind of long-term consequences they're going to be, but we're going to find out. So this, like I said, this is a global thing. Everything is on fire everywhere, it would appear. Now, I think that what's really interesting about this story is they're telling the story on a global level, but they also are including personal stories. like I said, I think the art in here is really good. I think that the facial expressions are really good. And this here is an example of one of these personal stories that really attaches you to the story. Now, what's happening here is that there's a little girl who has contracted this disease. She got it while she was on a school camp trip. And this here is the doctor talking to the mother and father, talking about how she wishes that there was something that she could do, but there's nothing more that they can do for her. All they can do is sort of just sit and hope and wait. And the only comfort that they can have as parents is that at least they managed to escape the contamination, which I'm sure to any parent is not going to be any sort of consolation whatsoever. Now, the parents here are, and once again, facial expressions are absolutely fantastic. They are trying to figure out what they can do. And then they realize there's nothing that they can do, except they do realize that, yeah, there is one thing that they can do. So they enter the quarantine room. They lie down there beside their infected daughter, and they make sure that she's not going to die alone, even though that probably means that they are going to perish as a result. It's heartbreaking, but it's great writing. So next we flip over to Moscow, where they're also having these problems. They know that the virus is fatal. Now their idea is that they want to basically, and this is going to seem very topical, they want to lock down the country. And the way their reasoning behind it is that, and they want to even close food stores. So this virus apparently kills people very quickly. So what they want to do is shut down everything, make everybody stay home, nobody can go out and get food, and the justification for it being is that people can go longer without food than it takes for this virus to run its course. Unfortunately, one of the guys here brings up a smallpox situation from the 70s, where there was one patient that had smallpox in an almost abandoned hospital, but the disease managed to creep out an open window up to the next floor in another window to infect another person. So they're trying to figure out what's going to happen here. This is still with the Russian delegation, I guess we'll say. And they're trying to figure out what to do. And then this little girl calls out to her father that she doesn't feel well. And we know what that means. So the next setting here is in China, in Beijing, and they've got their board up there where they see where the contagion is and what they're going to have to do to contain the virus in that area so that it doesn't get into the most populated areas of China. So the ultimate decision is made that they're going to have to go to the area where there's the most infection, and they're going to have to basically blow it up. And here you can see one of the officials. His entire family lives in the Jilin province, which is about to get blown up, and you can see him here talking on the phone. He's calling his wife, and you can see he knows what's about to happen. And she picks up the phone, happy-go-lucky. "Husband, I didn't expect to hear from you. You said you had meetings." And he responds, "I love you. I love you so much. I'm sorry." And her response is, "What is it, Wang?" what's, and then boom. So they've blown up that entire region. His wife has been killed. His entire family has been killed. And this is the tough decision that they've had to make to stifle this pandemic that has been engulfing the entire world. And the bottom panel just says, the Ring of Fire failed, and in less than a week, 10 million more died. So trying to firebomb this disease out of existence didn't work. It didn't slow it down. And then at this point, I just really love this scene. I love the facial expressions on even the smallest illustrations in these little panels here. People are rioting around the world. They want to know what's going on. They're just begging for mercy. They're begging for science, someone, anyone to save them. And it just doesn't appear as though that is happening. Now, here we have what remains of a Senate, I suppose, or a government, and they're trying to figure out what is happening. And this guy here is saying there's these pills that cure the disease, and the response is no, I'm afraid they don't. They end it before the most horrific and devastating symptoms take place. The government will need authorization, and they'll need to dole it out in the right amounts to small families and stuff like that. And at this point, it was just 2 months since the virus had appeared. So things are going haywire for sure. And I'll read it to you. In those 2 months, 400 million perished. As I mentioned before, the streets are very empty. They're silent. And it just seems like, a desolate world. And then another black screen. There's another black panel. There's an emergency broadcast, and they say they're interrupting the broadcast to bring extraordinary news. And what this news anchor is basically saying is that all of a sudden, that was a bad one. There we go. All of a sudden, the virus has stopped. The symptoms have gone away. Humanity appears to be saved. There's parties in the streets all over the world, in Melbourne, Chicago, St. Petersburg, Seoul, Korea, Nairobi, all those sorts of places. And then they show many different holy places around the world where people are gathering and praising God because they have saved them. And it is a very interesting little thing, because how did this disease just disappear? And nobody's asking that question. They're just happy that it's gone. So leaders around the world are trying to figure out what this was. Was this a biological weapon? Was this something to cover up a genocide? Was it an act of God? They're trying to figure out what's going on. And then this lady here just says, I don't care about any of that. What matters to me is that I'm alive. My whole family is alive. And being alive is amazing. Now, here's where we get into that 5%. So, as mentioned before, there is 5% of the people that got this disease survived. Now, they mentioned earlier they don't know what's going to happen with these people, and we're about to find out. We have two sisters here. I'm assuming one of them had the virus, the other one did not, although I'm not 100% sure. They're talking here, they're saying goodbye to each other because Susie, who is the one who is, well, it's hard to tell. They kind of look the same here, but this is Susie. And it's because Susie realizes that it's her job to try to do good in the world, because as we can see in these panels over here, having survived this pandemic has given Susie powers. We don't know what those powers are, but clearly she's got something. And whatever it is, it's quite impressive. And I really like this illustration there too. And so we have, actually, it's hard to say. Maybe she died. I don't know. It's a little confusing. I don't think she died. But her sister is also touching a flower here and emitting some electricity. So you never know what's going to be happening in the future there. Now, of course, this whole situation leads to political upheaval in the United States. For the first time in however many years, we have an independent candidate run and win the presidency. And basically, he's not the nicest guy. Nobody seems to trust him too much, because basically what he wants to do is institute martial law in the United States, have curfews, things like that. Like I said, this is very kind of topical as to what's going on in the world today. And he wants to secure the borders, and because I guess part of what started this pandemic, at least on the United States side, was something that occurred in the Mexican desert, but the other military guy is telling him that the threat came out of the sky, not from across the border. So more discussions here with the president, and basically he's gonna do what he's gonna do, and there's really nothing much that's gonna stop him. They agree to disagree. The military guy says he's going to go public with this information. The president says, you go have at it. We'll see who wins the battle of public opinion, and they part ways. Of course, the president wasn't being too honest, and as he leaves, he is thrown into a limousine by a bunch of men and driven off to an unknown location. Probably nothing good is going to happen to him there as well. And here we see that it wasn't just that one person who had the powers. There are other people that have powers. They are what they're calling the lucky few, the lucky 5%, the survivors, the discards, the beautiful, the hidden, the hopeful, and the lost. So, flip one last page here, and then they're still talking about these 5%. There is also the searching, the transcendent, the mad, the dangerous, and the resistance. And it says to be continued. And I have to say, I'm very, very impressed with this first issue here. It's a 6-part series. Very much liked the story in this. It is perfectly topical for what's happening in the world today. But the quality of the book, the quality of the art, the quality of the writing, it's all really good. It's definitely recommended. Very happy that the comic shop owner was recommending for me to pick this up, because I don't think this is something that I would have wanted to miss. So as far as indie review goes, this one's a fantastic one. So I would highly recommend you go and pick up Resistance issue 1, and probably 2 through 6 as well, but we'll get there in time. If we can get our hands on those books, that is. That's still up in the air. But thank you very much for joining me here on the Son of the Morning Comics channel. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you can see when new videos arise. Leave some comments if you want. Come visit me at Twitter at sonofthemorning7, and have yourself a wonderful morning, evening, noon, or night.